Hi everyone, it's 1 o'clock. We're going to give everyone just a few more minutes to get logged in here. We'll get started here in about 2 minutes. All right, hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Websites That Work, How to Turn Your Visitors into Donors. My name is Bradley Martin. I lead the sales and marketing efforts here at Kindful, and we're very excited about our guest presenter today, Rod Arnold from Leading Good. We actually have the pleasure of having Rod in our office today for this webinar. If you're not familiar with Rod, he is the co-founder and strategy and marketing lead at Leading Good. As the former CEO of Charity Water, Rod helped lead the young organization through a period of tremendous growth. Now he helps other nonprofits grow by applying principles and strategies that are proven to work. He has over 20 years experience leading and driving growth for nonprofit and social impact organizations. Before we pass it off over to Rod, I do have a couple quick housekeeping notes. First, you can expect to receive a recording of the webinar and the slides emailed to you after the webinar, so no need to spend time today trying to remember that keyboard shortcut to take screenshots and stuff like that. Secondly, we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. So get those questions in early and often. We'll be monitoring them throughout the webinar. You can just use the GoToWebinar control panel there, and you'll see on the panel a questions tab. Just expand that, throw your questions in there, and we will pick as many as we can at the end to answer. Lastly, we sent out an email just a few hours ago asking for attendees to submit their websites for us to review live. We had dozens of you respond. Thank you for that. We have picked three to five, depending on how much time we have, that Rod's going to review before we head into the questions at the end. If your website didn't get chosen, don't worry about it. You'll have an opportunity to request a free one-on-one review of your website with Rod at the end of the webinar. So, okay, let's get started. If you've been on our last webinar, one of the things we did that worked really well was ask a poll question. And this is a good opportunity to get everyone involved and give you the opportunity to see where your confidence is in your website versus everyone else's attending. And so I'm going to put this poll up real quick. You should see it show up on your screen here in place of the slide momentarily. So it looks like it's up now. So go ahead and fill out that answer there. You can just click on one of the answers. Let us know where you think. I'm going to leave it up for about 10 more seconds. And let people continue. It looks like we've got about 70% of people have voted. Okay, so I'm going to close it here in just a second, and I'll show the results. So we'll go ahead and share those results now. And so great. It looks like 61% is the largest that's not sure. And Rod, what's your thoughts about this?
Kind of makes sense to me that they're on this webinar because a lot of people are not sure or realize they need help. So For the 1% of you that are very confident, I applaud you, and I hope that maybe we can show you one or two things that you might learn today. So should we dive into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ready to go? All right, let's dive into it. I'm gonna take you through some things today that I think are, pretty valuable and also pretty simple and clear and easy to implement. So some of these things doesn't mean you need to redo your entire site. It's really about making some changes that can make a big impact, some simple changes that can make a big impact. And what we're going to do over the next little bit here is I'm going to walk you through 8 essential ingredients of an effective nonprofit website. And these are really things that we've learned from, over the years working with literally and evaluating hundreds of nonprofits and websites and messaging strategies and things like that, and seeing these are the things that really make a big impact. So we'll take you through those kind of 8 essentials. One of the things we're going to talk about is a simple test to know if your website is on point. This is going to be, I think you'll like this a little bit. This will be real simple and easy for you to do. We're also going to talk about some of the most valuable real estate on your website and how to use that most effectively. We'll give a few examples of really good nonprofit websites and then some that are not so good. And you'll see how these 8 essentials kind of come to life either in a good way or not so good way. And then, like I said, we'll give you some easy and free changes you can make that'll radically improve your site. And then we'll take some of your questions at the end. Before that, we'll review a few sites, as Bradley said, and then we'll take some of your questions. So here we go. So the big picture is this. People no longer read your websites. They don't, when the webs came on the scene, early on, people would just treat it like an encyclopedia with go to these sites and read lots and lots of text. That's no longer the case. People don't have time. They're looking not so much to read, but to scan, especially as we move to more and more mobile. If you're looking at your Google Analytics, you're probably seeing just a continual migration to mobile viewership. And we're seeing a lot of our clients, 50+% of their viewers are coming on mobile. So that makes it even more necessary that your website is scannable. And so what that means is design matters, definitely matters, but design is not everything. But just because you have a great website that looks great doesn't mean it's really working effectively for you. So if you've only got a little bit of time to capture someone's attention and they're going to scan it, what are the things that you need to be able to say to them? And I'll tell you this off the top, words matter. The words you use matter, and how you use them on the page matters significantly, because that is what ultimately, if your website's working, people are going to be reading that, engaging with it, and then compelled to take action, donate, or whatever your call to action is. So we're going to move into this right now. We'll go into the 8 essentials. And the first one is really that your website needs a clear and concise headline. When someone lands on your website, you have about 3 seconds to convince them that it's interesting enough to them, it's meaningful enough to them that they should continue to read down the page. So what we call that part of the top of the page is what we call above the fold. It kind of goes back to the old newspaper when they used to fold the newspapers, the part above the fold that they can see. So what is it that your people, your visitors see when they land on your site above the fold? Here's this is a site, this is actually a client that we've been working with to redo their site and redo their messaging. This is their current site. And one thing I notice here when I land on this page is, there's some, it's simple and clear, great image, but I don't really know who they are. I don't really know what they do. It's kind of vague. For instance, how do you empower the local church? Who are the most vulnerable? Where do you work? Down at the bottom, it says for over 70 years, they've touched the lives of millions of people. What does it mean to touch the lives? Do you do bicycles for kids? What is it that you do? So, the reason I'm bringing this one up is because they know this client, this nonprofit knows that they need to make some changes. So this would not be a surprise to them if they heard me talking about this, and they may be, as far as I know. But it is not necessarily the clearest and most compelling introduction to the nonprofit. If you confuse someone or you don't motivate them to read more, then you've already lost them. So we want to make sure that the header, the heading, and the headline really compels people to keep going. Here's an example of a great website, a great organization, St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and super simple, super clear, finding cures, saving children. I know exactly what they do. The image backs up the words. I know exactly what they want me to do. They want me to donate. That's clear. So there's not much there at all, but it's simple and clear. And often simple and clear and straightforward is the most important thing. It doesn't have to say a lot, doesn't have to tell me where they're located, doesn't have to tell me exactly what treatments they have or what things they're trying to cure. All I know is I want to help that child. And that's a strong headline and header and a above the fold section to website. And we'll see some more of these when we get into the reviews a little bit later on. All right. Okay. So the next one we're going to talk about is, well, actually the next thing here is the test I want to tell you about. And it's real simple. Is your website smarter than a fifth grader? Well, the answer to that is hopefully not. You don't want your website to be too complicated, too much involved with it. Here's a little test I would recommend that you try. Find a fifth grader, someone who doesn't know much about your organization, and a literal fifth grader can work for this. Set your laptop down in front of them, open to your website, and just let them look at it for about 10 seconds, and then close your laptop. Can that fifth grader tell you what you do and why they should care? Because if they can't, then your website is smarter than a fifth grader. And even though that sounds like a good thing, it's really not. Think about this website we just looked at with St. Jude's. I guarantee you a fifth grader knows what they do and why it matters. And that's a great little test. So try that at home. Feel free to try that at home. All right. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about, number 2. Your website should clearly explain the problem and why it exists. Now, this is something that a lot of nonprofits overlook because they just assume people know what the issue that they're trying to solve is. So let me give you an example. Or think about it like this. Whatever issue that you're tackling, let's say it's homelessness, or let's say it's hunger, or it might be animal rescue, or it might be, we work with human trafficking organizations and refugee organizations. Those are pretty complex issues. Even some of the most simple issues are actually, you can't assume that everyone knows what you're talking about. You understand it completely because you live in it and you work in it every day. But what about the rest of us? I don't automatically know or understand why there are people homeless in Nashville, or why young people are being trafficked in Asia. So we have to explain that to people and make sure that it's simple and clear. And a lot of these issues that are complex, the best thing we can do is to break down the issue, break down the problem into simple, bite-sized pieces. Here's an example. This is a client of ours called Love Justice International, and they work with stopping sex trafficking in South Asia. So really simply on their page, they have an explanation explaining the problem and why it exists. How does a young girl enter a life of sex trafficking? Deception. They're forced or deceived to leave their homes. False promises, usually with false promises of marriage or money. And then slavery. They're deceived and sold into slavery, where they're raped, tortured, or imprisoned. Real simple and clear. But if I am just new to this issue and I'm new to this organization, I don't really understand why these girls how they ended up in a trafficking situation until I'm told by this on this website. So explaining the problem. This is something that if you look at your own website, there's a pretty good chance you might be overlooking this. This is one of the things we see nonprofits overlook most of the time is how do they clearly, specifically tell why the problem exists. Here's another example. This is another client of ours called Pathlight International. They're asking people to give to help children in Belize get access to education. Well, why? If they work with these kids all the time in Belize, why do these kids need education? Why can't they just go to school like everybody else? Well, here they do, right below the fold, explaining why 50% of Belizean children do not attend high school because it's not free. So, and 40% of Belizeans live in poverty, so they can't afford school. And without an education, the cycle of poverty continues. So real clear and simple explanation of this problem that they are working to solve. If I didn't have that section, I wouldn't know why it's important for me to give. And when you tell someone the problem, when you break it down into bite-sized pieces, there's three important things that happen. First is people trust you as an expert on the issue. Even if it seems simple and obvious why your problem exists, explaining it clearly and making it real simple and scannable, like you've seen in these two examples, it makes people trust you as an expert. Oh, they understand this problem. They get it, so I can trust them. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing is that they, as potential donors, better understand how your nonprofit's work really makes a difference. If they don't understand the problem, they can't understand why your work matters. So explaining the problem helps set up the solution that you offer. And thirdly, by explaining the problem, they have more empathy for your cause. So just saying, give children in Belize access to education is important, but without explaining how they can't go because it's not free and they don't have money and they can't afford transportation, books or uniforms or any of that stuff, helps me create empathy with this little girl on this page. So that is an important piece that I hope you don't overlook. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, your website should show your simple plan to solve the problem. So you've just set up the reader as they're scanning down the site. You've created a header that compels them to read further. It's compelling enough to get them to read further. It's simple and clear. You've explained, so they understand what you do. That you've explained the problem. You've explained why the problem exists. Now you need to really clearly show them what your plan is to solve that problem. And if you explain this in a very clear and simple way, it can set their mind at ease and they know, okay, there is a solution. So I feel like there's this trafficking situation or there's this homeless situation or there's this education situation. Oh, here is the solution to that problem. And then they can more simply understand why their donation makes a difference and how it makes a difference. So here's a couple examples. This is from Donors Choose, great organization. And you can see here, they show you exactly what their plan is. You find a project, we fulfill the order, teachers thank you. Really simple, really clear. This is their 3-step solution to this problem. Now, one thing that's kind of a bonus here to be aware of is there is something about the human mind that loves threes. We call it the rule of 3. You'll see it over and over if you look at really good websites. 3 things, and you think about ABC, 1, 2, 3. It's built into our brains as a really simple way to organize information. So try to use that when you can, when you're thinking about the problem or you're thinking about the solution that you're offering. Break it into 3, maybe 4 bite-sized, scannable bits of information so that people can clearly and quickly understand it. Here's another one, back to that Love Justice organization that I showed you earlier that showed the problem. This is their plan to solve that problem. So how do they protect the innocent? Monitoring, interception, follow-up. Real simple, really clear. Shows the 3 ways, the 3 things that they do to solve the problem of human trafficking in South Asia. Now, you might say, well, we have like 15 steps in ours. There's no way we could do it in 3. Well, if you show them all 15 things that you do to solve the problem that you're working on, that you're dedicated to, it will just simply overwhelm people. I have this little saying I like to say: if you try to tell them everything, they won't hear anything. So don't try to tell them everything. You're not doing a training for new staff. You're not trying to tell them all the ways, all the things that you do. Maybe if you're sitting with a major donor and you have 3 hours, or with a foundation and you're laying out a big proposal, you can dive deeper. But even then, I would start with breaking it down into real simple bite-sized pieces, categories that the mind can really comprehend. So that's one little action step you can take out of this, is how do you tell your problem and your solution in 3 kind of real simple bite-sized pieces. It'll really pay off if people understand how you do what you do, why it matters, and why they can make a difference with their donation or their involvement. Okay, we're going to move on. Number 4, your website should have a strong primary call to action. Well, that might be obvious for most nonprofits. That strong primary call to action is donate. But I'll say, just because you have a donate button doesn't mean you're using it correctly or the most effectively. There's a lot of mistakes that nonprofits make, and for example, having too many calls to action. If you have 5 things you give people a choice to do, that's too many choices, and they won't do anything typically if you give them that many options. So break it down to, what is the one primary thing? If you could only ask them to do one thing, I'm not saying you can't have more than one, I'll explain that in a minute. But if you could only ask them to do one thing, what would that be? It kind of really gets down to strategy. What is the purpose of your website? What is the one thing? If you're a school or a clinic or something like that, you might want people to also sign up or register for your school or book an appointment with your clinic. But you have to decide, what is the primary purpose of your website? What is that primary call to action? Because you can only have one primary call to action, or you should only have one. And that should be clear and obvious. It shouldn't be too vague, like get started or make a difference, because those are kind of soft and unclear calls to action. Get started doing what? Make a difference how? What is it that you want me to do? Tell me, make it clear. And then another problem people make is kind of neglecting the prime real estate on the site. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. This is another one of our clients that we've developed a new site and hasn't launched yet, but it's in development. And this, or a new messaging and a wireframe for their site. And this is a great organization based in New York, but they got a lot going on here. There's a lot of different things. I'm not really sure exactly. I guess, I do see that there is a Give Today button over on the right, but it's sort of down the page a bit. There's a lot of different things. One of the things that you'll what I land on this site, back to our first point, is I don't really know exactly what they do. And maybe you still don't. You're looking at this, you don't know what they do. Well, what they do is they provide meals for people who are too sick to cook or shop for themselves, people in New York. And so that is not super obvious here. So I don't really know what you do, so why would I want to give, and where's the primary call to action? The most valuable real estate on your site is the upper right-hand corner, up there where it says enter keyword and go on this site. That is where the mind automatically goes. If you go back to, back to this St. Jude site, they have a donate button in the upper right-hand corner. That is where the mind goes. If you think about, like, when you're on most good websites, or like a Google, Google Docs, for example, there's a primary call to action up on their right-hand side, and that is the prime spot where people go to take action. So make sure you use that real estate effectively. Here's another one. This is called Adopt a Love Story. Very simple and clear what they do. They help families overcome financial obstacles to adoption. One thing I love about what they do, you've got your donate button that stays up in the right-hand corner, but their call to action is also very specific. It's not just give, it's give to adoption. it provides some emotional context to the give, which I love. Here's another one. This is an organization called Rescue Freedom. And very simple what they do. They've got the donate button, and they've got join the team, which is also another way they're saying donate. And here's another really key part of this is their primary call to action is not just on above the fold. This is, if I back up and look at their entire, this is their full page, their full home page. All these arrows are pointing to primary calls to action. Each of these links that I'm pointing to would take me to their donate page. So you want to make sure that you're asking, and not just asking once or twice, but asking often throughout the page and throughout the site, sometimes in different ways, sometimes as a hyperlink in a paragraph, other ways as a button that people can give to, or even as an image on the very bottom there. So ask directly and ask often. All right. Okay, we're going to keep going because we got a lot to get to. Number 5. Your website should have a transitional call to action. So this is, you might call transitional or a secondary call to action, but this call to action has a very clear purpose, because not everybody who comes to your site is ready to get married. They're not all ready to donate. They want to, it's the first date. Asking them, if they've just come for the first time, asking them to get married is a big step. So what's the second date call to action? What does that look like? And this is something that, a lot of nonprofits do this, a lot of organizations do this, where they just say, join our mailing list. Well, I would challenge you to, first of all, make it something that's a little more interesting than just join our mailing list. I love what Pencils of Promise does. Become part of something bigger than yourself. Together, we're creating a future where all children have a chance to succeed. So they're asking you to join their mailing list. They're asking you to join their community, but they're doing it in a way that's a little more interesting and a little more, it feels like it's a better way to ask that. And the goal here is to if someone lands on your site and they're not ready to donate, the goal is to get these email addresses, get their contact information, so you begin to develop a relationship with them. I won't go into this on this webinar, but what you should have coming out of this is, as soon as you get this new email address, this triggers an automated email sequence where people are, we call it a lead nurturing sequence, where they're getting 5 or 6 automated emails over the course of a couple of weeks that orient them, educate them about your organization, and compel them to want to give. An even better way to do this, I love this approach. This is an organization called the Exodus Road, and it's also an anti-trafficking organization. If you can give people something free, in this case, it's a free ebook called The Wife's Journey into Sex Trafficking and Rescue. So not only are you asking people to do something, but you're giving them something of value. And this is what we call a lead magnet, where you're offering them a free PDF or a free ebook or a free something digital, something it's not expensive to you, but it's something of value. And the great thing about that is, obviously it creates a relationship where they're digging deeper into your story, they're reading more, but giving them something of value also creates a sense of reciprocity, where people, you've done something for them, so they're more likely to do something for you when you ask them to give. And that's a powerful place to be in as a nonprofit. All right, we're going to keep rolling here. Number 6, your website should visually show the impact a donor can make. Now, this is really critical because donors really need to see happy, smiling faces of the people you help. And here's the reason why. It's how you show that what you do is working. And faces, smiling faces, testimonials like this are powerful ways to show that I can make a real difference in the life of one person. That's even more powerful than saying that you help 1 million people. If I can see one person, I'm more likely to give to that one person who I can impact than I am to the 1 million people that you're helping. I had to do the obligatory charity water example here, because they do such a great job of having great, inspiring images of the people that they're helping. Make sure that you create a story, a story that people want to be part of. I want to be part of helping this woman get what she needs, getting the water that is going to make her life better, for example. The Sarah McLachlan commercials late at night with the the sad faces, or the old, used to be Sally Struthers back in the day. Those can work, guilt can work, but it's typically transactional. People give out of guilt and out of that sense of desperation because they want to solve that need, but it doesn't necessarily create a long-term relationship. And I would rather have someone give and want to be part of an ongoing relationship with our organization because they want to be part of a story that's actually working, that's making people's lives better by creating a positive outcome. So the people you help, or in some cases the animals you help, or the environment that you help, that is the hero. They are the hero of your story, not you. Make them the hero, talk about them, and invite people to be part of their story. We'll talk more about that in just a second. All right, moving on. Number 7, your website should show that you are an authority. Now, I just said statistics are not the best thing to use, but they are important. There is an important part here for you to, an important role for you to play here, which is you understand how to solve this issue and to show that you've been doing it for a while and you've made an impact. And a big, bold statistic can really help with that. That doesn't mean you leave out the images. You can see on this page, even this is Charity Water again, great images. You see the smiling, happy faces, but you also see that they funded 28,000 water projects for 8.2 million people around the world. Now, two things I want to point out about this. First of all, it's done in a very inclusive way. It says, with your help. That's a big piece. It's not just look at us, we're the hero. It's with your help, we've been able to do this. They're making people a part of it. And like I said, you're using that as a way to show authority, but you're not leaving out the emotional side of these people that you're helping, the faces that of the people that you can help. Another way to do this is through testimonials. If you don't have a great statistic, and by the way, don't try to give 7 statistics. Just one substantial, bold statement is great. Or this is, another way to do it is through a testimonial. This is someone that has been benefited from this organization, God's Love We Deliver, talking about how the nutritious meals have helped her make her life so much better and easier. This is a great way to show that authority as well. All right. Okay, that's the first 7. We're down to the final number 8. Your website should tell a story. Your brand, your organization should have an overarching story. I'm not necessarily talking about a story, an actual story of something that happened to someone. I'm talking about the story of your work, the story of the people that you help in general, an overarching brand story. This is World Vision. They do an incredible job of telling a story of lifting kids out of poverty, that they had this destiny, this purpose to shine, and that you can be a part of that. With $39 a month, you'll help a child, their family and community tackle the root causes of poverty. I mean, it's such a beautiful story all right there. Every story needs a hero, and like I said, you are not the hero of your story. So we love to think about brands, and especially nonprofit brands, in the context of a story, and every story needs a hero. One way to know if you're making yourself the hero of the story is to look on your website, for example, and say, how many times do you use the word we this, we did this, we do this is what we do, versus talking about the people that you're helping and how great they are and how much their lives matter. So be careful of too much we language. Use it sparingly. But that story arc is really important. Story arc, a typical story arc has a hero, a main character. They want something. There's a problem they need to overcome to get that thing that they want. Like in this case, these people, they just want to be out of poverty. They want to have a life that's meaningful and purposeful and fulfilling. But poverty is the problem that is stopping them from succeeding. What they need is someone to help them. They need a plan, a guide who can help them, a guide with a plan who can help them be successful and overcome that. Then there's this dramatic tension. Will they be able to overcome that problem and have success and get what they want. And that's kind of a story arc. If you watched a movie, you would see that. You'd see Luke Skywalker, who wants to help save, the universe, and he has a problem. He has this thing he has to overcome, and he needs a guide to help him do that. And that guide is, Yoda helps him see a path forward, a plan for him to succeed and be victorious and be successful. This is the role that you play. You play the role of the guide, and you invite the donor to come in and be a part of this story with you and participate in the success of your hero. And the best way to do this, and this might sound a little overwhelming, I don't want it to, because it's really not that overwhelming. We use a messaging framework, and messaging framework is the best way to do this, to tell a consistent, clear story. We use a messaging framework called a brand script, and I would really encourage you to look into that, or at the end of this, you'll have a chance to connect with me and we can talk more about that. But a brand script is what, brand script is what World Vision uses. It's what Charity Water uses. It's the same framework, and it can really help you clarify that message. So those are your 8 things. I hope that was helpful, and I think now we're going to move into some website reviews, right, Bradley?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Rod. Yeah, I think it was really helpful, and I think we're going to jump in here and look at a couple of live website reviews. I do want to make sure everyone's aware that these are a few you guys just sent in a few hours ago. Rod hasn't had a lot of time to dive deep into these. He would typically ask you a series of questions to really. So understand, this is going to be surface level feedback. Is that right? Just kind of what you see at a glance. So we'll start off here with Mocha Club.
I've literally had about 30 seconds on each of these. So
yeah,
we're kind of doing this on the fly. But I'll tell you this right now, Mocha Club, some really good things I see. You got that donate button in the upper right. I mean, the very first thing that I see when I open this up is there is a great image on the above the fold. You've got a real simple, clear navigation. I understand that I'm interested enough to move forward, to move further down the page. Be a dream maker. Local leaders have dreamt ways to fight extreme poverty in their communities in 2018. Join them. I like that. I will tell you, if you go scroll down a little bit, Bradley, that right here, our mission, we're an international community committed to fighting extreme poverty in Africa with everyday generosity. I like that a lot. In fact, I might think of ways to maybe tweak the sub-headline in the very top part there in the banner to say that. Like I might swap those 2 statements even. I'm not sure, I need to think about that, but those 2 statements, because that statement down below is really clear, really clearly tells me what you do. I would love to see that up top, and maybe this other statement comes down below. I'm not sure. That might make sense. I'm going to close that, or is that part of, okay. Yeah, I like that, by the way. I like the fact that you give people a chance to communicate directly with you on chat. Our mission, now it's good, you've got your kind of this rule of 3. That's good. You got your Mochas, African leaders fighting extreme poverty together. That's a really good kind of way to say, here's what you do and here's how it works. The one thing that maybe would be good to add in here is explaining the problem that you're solving. If you're fighting extreme poverty, why is there poverty? And I know we talk about poverty a lot in nonprofit work, but explaining maybe a breakdown of why extreme poverty happens, and why is it that people are living in extreme poverty might be a great way to build some empathy and show that you're an expert at understanding that problem. So moving down, it's a great image, and it's clear. It's pretty scannable overall, the site. I like that. I'd love to see, that's good, keep going down. I'm just going to look at the page as we go down here. Get involved. I'd maybe love to see a little bit more, oh, here you go, you got your calls to action. So calls to action down the page, different ways to get involved. Keep going down. So there's your transitional call to action. That's a pretty good one. It's not, it's not a free something, but it's definitely more interesting than just join our mailing list. So a lot of good stuff here. I'd say, you're on a really good track. There's maybe a few things you could do to tweak and add a little bit to it to really make me understand the problem you're solving, and maybe even a little bit more on how you solve it on that. If you go down a little bit to that mission part, You know, this is great. So maybe you could clarify this a little bit more. So it starts with me. I am committing by everyday generosity. But then you also say it starts with local leaders. So which one does it start with? So, but maybe it's like that money goes to empower local leaders, if that's what it is. So just maybe clarify that messaging just a little bit there. So good job overall.
Yeah, and Rod, if you don't mind me adding, one of the things I love about the Mocha Club is one of our customers, we're Kindful, and one of the things that they do so well is getting recurring monthly donations. So you see here, this 29 suggested, it's already prompting a suggestion for you on the amount you can give per month. So instead of asking for more of a large upfront donation, they're really immediately going to, you can give a little bit per month, right? And make a really large impact. So I love the idea of recurring donations.
And by the way, I didn't get into this on this earlier, but the idea of be a dream maker, what you're doing is you're making these kids heroes, but you're also making the donor a hero, which is great. You're saying the donor, you can make a dream come true. You can be a dream maker. And that's another powerful way to make it about them and not about you. So kudos. Good job.
Right. So we're probably only gonna, I want to make sure we save room for some questions here at the end. So we're going to look at 2 more and we'll kind of breeze through them fast, if that's all right, Rod.
Yeah.
And so this other one is, the next one is the Ohio end of life options.
Yeah, thanks for sending this in. So some good things for sure. You got that strong donate button in the upper right. I would love to see just a little, you know, more clearly right in the banner, exactly what you do and who you are and what you do. Now, I see that it's about death and dignity for terminally ill, but what is it that you do to help people exactly? Is it just talking about it, or is there some specific services that you offer? I would like to understand that a little bit more about the impact that you make. And, you know, this is a design thing and you can take it or leave it. I tend to, you know, like to have the whole image across the page. I just think it makes it really, I don't get confused by other things on the right side of the page. These subscribe, sign up, and all of that in the Facebook stuff is good, but it could also distract me from the main message in the core of what you're trying to say. And by the way, go back up real quick. The sign up, you know, give me a reason to sign up. Give me something that I can take away that's a reason for me to sign up. In fact, go down. I noticed this earlier. This was a big thing. So you've got this fact sheet. Click on that fact sheet for a second. You've got this great fact sheet. You know, why not give you my email address to get that fact sheet rather than just give it to me for free? I mean, you can still make it for free, but ask for my email address. It's a great lead generator, lead magnet for you to, you know, right there, you could just have a little entry form where someone gives you their email address and then download the fact sheet. Real simple and a way to start building your email list, building your constituency that way. Now, one thing I would say is you got a lot of calls to action on this page. Read the fact sheet, request a speaker. On top, you had a couple other, you know, I think you had like us on Facebook, sign up, lots of different calls to action. I would trim that back a bit maybe. You know, one thing that I see a lot is nonprofits especially try to put so many things on your page. Be simple, be clear, use your footer. Go down to the footer for a second. Your footer is what we like to call your junk drawer. So a lot of the things, and you got a lot of stuff in here already, but a lot of the stuff that people put on their page, we would tell them, put in your footer, think of it as a junk drawer. You can put lots of stuff down there and it won't clog up your main site. So,
and people know to go there to look for things. You think like oftentimes if you want to learn more about a company like that, about us, you automatically know to go to the footer. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would just make this a little cleaner and simpler and clearer. What problem are you solving and how are you solving it? And I would, you know, I think you could really just make a few tweaks and make that a little clearer and a little stronger.
Okay, great.
Right.
Well, we're going to move on to one more here and we'll go through this one and then we'll move on to make sure we just save a little bit of room here for questions. So this is the Health for the World.
Yeah, the Medical Missions Foundation. There's so many good things here. It's a great headline, very clear what you do. Provide surgical and medical care in underserved communities throughout the world. So really great. You got your donate button. That's obviously the main button. The same thing on the upper right. Pretty good image. You know, I always like faces, but if, you know, a little hand like that is really powerful as well. But something about, you know, if you go down and you look at these images right here, for example, the one in the middle draws my eye because these kids are looking me in the eye. So just in terms of visuals, I want to see people's eyes and I want to make contact. So singular images of people looking me in the eye are always powerful. So what I might do here somewhere, if you go and scroll down, let me see the whole page real quick. Yeah, so there's just not a whole lot on here. It's a great start, but I would add a little bit more content to the home page. You don't have to, you know, the way that websites have evolved and what people are used to now is scanning down and getting the whole story on the home page rather than have to click around a lot. So I would, you know, add a couple sections in here, really clearly explain the problem, why it exists, and the rule of three, you know, like we talked about. Really clearly explain the solution that you offer, how it works, and the impact that you make. And then, you know, I would love to see, scroll down again here. Is there a way for me to just, I guess, stay in touch? What does go back? What does stay in touch take me to? Okay, so that's, you know, not bad, but I would love to see a way to.
Whoops, sorry that. Let me open that back up, and then it opened up a weird thing on my browser. So
okay.
make sure that.
Oh, that's your Google Analytics.
Yeah, there we go.
But you know, give me a reason to stay in touch. Like, what is it? Stories of what? Of stories that'll inspire me, make me feel good. Give me something a little more emotional that wants me to, you know, for me to give you my email address. So great. Some good stuff, but I would add to that and make it a little more specific down the page.
Okay, great. And I did mention, if I'm going to pull this back up. If, you know, a lot of you, I was noticing even during the webinar, we were still getting emails of people submitting their information. So we have one more quick poll question for you, and that is, would you like Rod to contact you about a free website review, right? And so this is an opportunity that if you like what Rod has been talking about today and you'd like to see him reach out to you, I'm going to launch this poll here. Go ahead, and it looks like it's launching. Go ahead and click there. I'm going to give it a few minutes, and if you're interested, you know, we're going to make sure Rod has the contact information for these folks, and he'll find a way to, you know, try to get in touch with as many people as possible to kick off conversations, learn what you're interested in, and how he may be able to help and provide some feedback. Right?
Sounds good. I will be in touch, and we'll do our best to get to all of you as soon as possible.
Great.
There's a lot of you on this call, actually. So.
Yeah. So it looks like there's quite a few of you that would appreciate that. So
keep it going for
bear with him there, and he'll try to get that over to you. So I do want to get into a Q&A session here, Rod, if that's okay. You know, I think I'm going to go through. We've got quite a few questions that have been submitted. So I want to start with one. I'll let you answer that while I breeze through some other ones. So one of the things as I was going through this, how do you start, right? So if I look at my website, and let's say I do have a nephew, niece, daughter, or whatever, and I say, hey, I'm going to open up the computer for 5 seconds or however long you said, and said, hey, take a look. And what does this website say? What does it tell you? And what they come back with is, I don't know, or something that is completely different than what you would expect. How do you get started in this process of really trying to redefine your brand script and start to tell a story that, and how do you do it? Maybe, is there a way to do it without having to tackle it all at once? How can you iterate?
Well, there's a short and a long answer. I'll give you the short answer. I would say this, ideally what you would do in the way to really do this right is to start with that messaging framework and really outline your story. So who's your hero? What's the problem? I mean, really outlining that full story and breaking it down to those bite-sized pieces like we talked about. And then what we do next, we put that into a brand script. There's a model, a framework for it. And then really outline, do what we call a messaging wireframe. So you're basically outlining your whole site, just words. You're not even thinking about pictures and images and all that stuff. Just what are the words? So if you put all those on a page and I just look at those words, do those words tell me what I need to know before I even put them on a website? So that's a wireframe. And then you kind of, from there, then apply those to your site. Now, that you might need help with that. That's something, that we help nonprofits with. But if you just want to make sure that you're, doing what you can right now, start with that banner above the fold. Does that clearly explain who you are and what you do? And if nothing else, look at the words that are above the fold and look at some of the examples we gave today. We'll send that out. You'll get that, and think, how can we more clearly explain and articulate who we are, what we do, and the impact people can make by donating.
Great. That's great. So so like I said, we have quite a few questions. One of the things that's kind of a theme as I was browsing through the questions here is Kara asked, how do you suggest an organization plan their website when it has two purposes? So for information for those we serve and trying to communicate the mission to supporters. So, if you have a thing where you're trying to drive traffic to get not only donations, but you're also trying to get the population that you serve to sign up or something, how do you balance that?
Yeah, and we saw, like I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and we saw, I think St. Jude had that on theirs, but I think what it really comes down to is, and this is an internal, typically strategic decision, what is the primary purpose of the site? And I understand there's two purposes here, but what I would say is, if people are coming to your website, what's the majority of those people? And if you're pushing people there to donate and you don't have your donate button as the primary call to action, you're gonna suffer in terms of donations, just plain and simple. So what I typically say, and it's kind of case by case, is that your website is your storefront for your fundraising. And so make sure, ideally, your donate button would be primary, and you would have very clearly next to it, very, very close to it, another button that's obviously secondary, but still easily available and easy to find for people who are coming, who are patients or constituents or potential registrants for whatever you're doing. But make that donate button primary. That's my kind of boilerplate answer. Now it depends on factors in your specific organization, but I would put both, but I would just make sure that donate button is clear and primary, ideally.
Great. And again, just to be thoughtful of everyone's time, this is the last question we'll answer for today, but it's also a theme I've seen a couple times. So there's been a couple folks who've asked, and actually Abby asked it, I work for an organization that isn't allowed to show the faces of our children. Do you have suggestions for how to compel our viewers to give? And there was another one that mentioned that they work with sex trafficking as well, and they can't, there's some privacy issues there. How do you go about providing imagery if you can't use your actual population you serve?
Yeah, and we've worked with organizations, we work with a number of similar, like human trafficking organizations, and they have that same issue. A couple things. One is, you can, if you can't show their face, you can at least show them, hopefully, like from behind. So you can't make out the identity of the child, but you could still see that it is, their kids, and just through their body language that they are happy or they're hugging someone or whatever it might be. So I would still make sure that you do show the people that you're helping, even if you can't show their identity, give their identity away. So from behind, maybe obscured some way. I don't love the idea of putting, your primary image being someone with a bar through their eyes or their face blurred out. That can be effective potentially, but it kind of has a negative connotation. So I would prefer just seeing them from behind, seeing them from the side, or hugging someone where you can't see, their identity. So that'd be my, I guess, my easy answer there.
Okay, great. Well, look, Rod, we really appreciate the time. It's super informative. I think this is a challenge not only nonprofits have, but all brands have, in terms of trying to figure out, and I would say that it's a thing that's always living and breathing, right? That you're always trying to improve and bring that story to life. Again, for everybody who came on and listened today, thank you so much for taking the time to spend an hour with us. We know that you guys are very, very busy, and that oftentimes you're under-resourced and understaffed, and you're trying to learn. So we hope that this was helpful. If you did say yes, that you want Rod to reach out, we're going to share your contact information from when you submitted your information for the webinar with him. And if you'd like to learn more about his organization, I realize we don't actually have a slide for this, which we'll add in before we share the slides, but visit leadinggood.com, is that right?
Yeah.
And you can see a little bit more about what Rod and his team does there. If you are at all interested in, if you haven't heard of Kindful or you're new to the Kindful brand, we are a donor management system that makes managing your donors easier. If you have any interest in learning more about us, please feel free to visit us at kindful.com and submit a demo there, and we'd be happy to talk to you about your donor management needs once you have your website where you're just getting so many donors you don't know how to handle it. Well, again, thanks everyone today for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Look out, we'll have some other webinars coming up in the next few weeks on various topics, so be on the lookout for those invites. Thanks again.
Bye, everybody.